really happy to introduce to you poet Matt Jose, spoken word poet and online personality. He delivers with a punch and a caress, depending upon the muse, marries now and then, and causes the mind to do backflips and spiral inward to wonder where it is, here or there. And inside this wonderment, there is a grand disorientation and genius at work, taking thought patterns from different realms and polishing each poem to a soft glow that pampers the heart and a harsh eloquence that nips at the soul. These poems are the pit bull of guardians of remembrance and soldiers of the dog days to come. And now I'm going to ask Candice James of Silver Bow to say a few words.
Being not normally a woman of few words, I'll try and keep it down to a few words. There's so much to say about Matt. He's a genius. He's here, he's now, he's amazing. Tough act to follow, so don't ever follow him on stage if you're going to be with him. Go first. And he's a kind of a different personality. When he's here, he's an earthling striving after poetic justice. And when he's not here, he's an Evidarian looking down on the earthlings, also striving for a poetic justice and taking notes and honing his own craft. He's an amazing poet, and without further ado, I turn you over to the great Matt.
That's why I was a little late. It was tough getting in this human skin today, but anyway, it worked out, didn't it? Thank you for having me. I don't know that I can follow up that introduction. It's more beautiful than the poetry I write, so this is great. So I'm going to be reading from my latest solo endeavor, Depending Upon the Muse. I also have, by far, my favorite creative collaboration of all time with Candice James. We are double trouble. Wherever we go, we are, in fact, double trouble. So today, I'm going to start off with, this poem is about, for anybody who's into seeing signs, the signs and wonder. I suppose if you look deep enough, everything can be symbolic of something. This one's called Matchstick Heed. Vast and pulling was the matchstick warning. Waiting comes with time and the streets are shaky like wobbling secretaries. I dreamt once I was climbing up the broken ladder of a vast universe belonging solely to the fragile compounds. Don't tread, don't tread. Distilled and pure was the matchstick warning. Wonderment comes with time and the streets are teeming with the immortal brilliance of a million fools. Don't rush, don't rush. Vast and pulling was the matchstick warning. Come to think of it, just yesterday I put some tea leaves in my back pocket to be read 1,000 years hence. Oh, to be alive still. Yes, to heed the matchstick warning. So look for the signs, look for the signs. Why not? All right, this next one, oh, those bastard landscapes we all look at from time to time. All right, this one is called Bastard Landscapes. Obsessed but without urgency and with a dog's stride, guarding against the bastard landscapes. The East Side writer sees the knife blade glint as hypnotizing symmetry. Hell yes, the bird flies south for a reason. Hell yes, the trapeze artist travels with the circus for a reason. Hell yes, the thin wire tomb of centuries was cracked long ago. Can you imagine it differently? Pass a full-length mirror in the darkness and then tell me so. Pass a sleeping peacock as the rooster crows and then you can tell me so. Pass a man sipping a whiskey flask brilliantly and then you can tell me so. Obsessed but without knowing and with an apologetic gait guarding against the bastard landscapes, the West Side critic pours too much cream in his coffee and doesn't care to think for himself. Hell yes, the veal cutlet was created from torture. Hell yes, the women of our dreams don't exist. Hell yes, the waitress cursed when the water glass shattered. Could you imagine it any differently? Pass a smiling homeless man mortgaged to the hilt, and then you can tell me so. Pass a worm crawling backwards through his skin, and then you can tell me so. Pass a headless ostrich beaking off in tongues, and then you can tell me so. Obsessed but without certainty, our guard let down so easily, we now join those bastard landscapes.
Oh,
yeah. Oh boy.
Wow.
This one's for This one's for anybody who ever has had a relationship go sour, boy. And if you haven't lived. I'm telling you. Anyhow, this one is called Overpriced and Watered Down. I can't even remember how the conversation started, but I remember it was over cocktails in a dimly lit bar. And the cocktails were overpriced and watered down, and the conversation was underwhelming and watered down, just as the relationship had been. She leaned in close and told me she was leaving. I asked her if she meant she was leaving the bar or leaving the apartment. She said both. I asked if she was going to finish her drink, and she said no. I asked if I could finish it for her. She said she didn't care. I asked if she meant about the drink or the relationship. She said both. So I drank that drink and watched her leave, wondering where all those wasted years had gone, and why is it that people fade so much faster than these nondescript walls? Hey, if you haven't had a woman walk out on you, you haven't lived. Speaking of machismo, this one is called Bravado in the Tilt. This one's for the sufferers. Like, this is for the people who are able to find the slightest victories as miraculous, because those are my people. Doesn't have to be anything too great. Every tiny slight wonderment is miraculous. Bravado in the Tilt. Rats and horror and bottled bravado are the only companions for some as they bravely face extinction in a world hardly mentioned. And if mentioned, it's only as an afterthought. Away from the senseless in the common where the light bulbs dangle with the wires exposed. Old men in dead rooms and dead men in old rooms. Even the flies long for the swatter. When the ships tilt, it's because they have a sense of the ocean's knowing. When the people tilt, it's because they don't. Simple yet not clear. This knowledge in a salami sandwich won't get you too far, but it's something. Like a nightly fine feeling if you can afford one, you know? Yeah, it's something. It's something. Take those nightly fine feelings when I can get them, that's for sure. All right, this next one is for all the outsiders. So I'm not saying I'm an outsider to try to sound cool. I've just never quite fit where everybody else did, and it was such a stigma. And now as I've gotten older, I've realized what a blessing and not a curse, because you start to meet the folks who didn't quite fit, and then those folks who didn't quite fit in with one another, and all of a sudden everybody feels great. So this is the outsider dissidence. The view from the outside is cleaner than one might imagine. It's clearer, without as much of the normal bone-chewed irrelevance to fog one's sight. Meanwhile, the view from the inside is unknown to most. It's foreign, with so much small, mustached unimportance fogging the glass of New World high-rise towers. The red steam of the hills can no longer be seen. The slumbering palm trees have been sent into lumber shock. The stiff-necked giraffes can no longer peek from behind fences of tempered sparrows. All this is happening as dogs sit upon hills at high noon, and all this is happening as 9-to-5 workforces melt into oblivion. All this is happening as the girth of fireflies is being diligently studied by postgrads somewhere. Now take a moment, really, right now, to check the contents of your pocket as you're listening to this. Did you find an audience applauding the bones of dead conductors past? Did you find a scarlet passion blossom blood-stained and bitter? Did you find a rusty coffee pot meant for a good night's sleep? Or did you find nothing at all? You know, empty pockets can speak volumes too, like an outsider's dissidence on the edge of misty housetops. It's only the charcoal puddles that are bound to last another 400 years, my friend. And that's the view from the outside. Yes. What's the name of the scientists that study insects? I can't remember. I don't know if anybody here knows what it is. But anyways, I often imagine what it must be like to be in the mind of an insect. I feel like they have such a different perspective. Anyhow, this one's called It's What the Insects Long For. I used to know what those scientists were called. No, this isn't the poem. I really used to know what those. I'm gonna look it up later. All right.
And they're called entomologists.
Thank you. I knew somebody
Ah, there you
would have
go.
the wherewithal. Yes. All the entomologists out there.
Yeah, I was
Ooh.
trying to say it, and I was on mute, so I wondered, why am I not talking?
And for the record, I saw you in my peripheral. You did not Google. You did not Google. You knew
Oh,
that. That was
yeah.
real. All right. What the insects long for?
Yeah, so cool.
As a loosening drabness, the length of a many miles bridge span shakes at the foundation, I look down and see that much of the weight resides in my gut area, which reminds me, temporary winds reign under chairs and rugs thrown out with yesterday's garbage. I don't think it was my fault that all the insects wanted more out of life, but they remain angry nonetheless. And as that anger crawls nearer, it causes my fingers to bleed at times, clawing at forever. But whether it's from fire or ice, the world as we know it is going to eventually end, and the insects will finally get what they've longed for all along, a life without humans, even if it also means their own annihilation. That was an uplifting one, a little post-apocalyptic. Yes. There's a flow to these. Here we go. Oh, corners and afternoon drinks. Oh my God, this is for all the barflies. This is for anybody who has had a residence on a local dive bar stool. This is for any, I could go on for days about this one. I am of the ilk. I'm a much calmer, gentler person in my elder years, but I had a good 2-decade residence on one of these lovely corner stools. Anyway, and that's nothing to be proud of, kids, if you're watching the show from home. Corners and afternoon drinks. Stools tucked away in corners of bars, tucked away around corners, or sat upon by men and women who cut corners. Leaning on wood, waiting for little stories to appear in nights full of death. These barfly gunslingers, like switch straw sketch artists, patiently await the leftovers of life. Tall glasses of whiskey poured 3 fingers tall, blank stares into barback mirrors of reflections unkind. Late morning and early afternoon drunks, feel-good moments, far away from frolicking picnics in the hills. Raw eggs are cracked into a morning beer to spell relief. Sure, yeah, sure. That was that one. And if you haven't put an egg in a beer, you haven't lived. All right, I'm a Bogart junkie. He's one of my favorite actors of all time. So any other lovers of Bogart, I just had to get his name in a poem to give, 100 years from now, the kids need to know who the greats were. I'm not saying the actors now aren't great. This has nothing to do with the poem, but if I had to give a list of my favorite actors right now, I'm going Brad Pitt, I'm going Denzel Washington, I'm going Johnny Depp, I'm going George Clooney, just to name a few. And I hope that their names 70 years from now show up in somebody's poem. All right, this one's called Like Bogart Would. Drunken dentists holding flowers of chance, like Bogart would, tend not to believe the talk about simple violence. And 2 angry flies are better than 1 if your goal is to gather as many angry flies as possible. These are the things you won't learn in school along with much else, but you can learn it in the streets and in the sandwich shops or in the subway stations or in the madhouse. All you have to do is watch. Watch the people, watch their movements, watch the action of it all. And if you happen upon those drunken dentists holding those flowers a chance, ask them which they believe better sustains life, agony or peace. If they answer peace, politely move on. If they answer agony, you found your guru. Just like Bogart would. All right. Worms showed up in this book like at least 4 or 5 times. It's never conscious. When I'm writing, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna make sure worms are there's got to be 4 or 5 poems with worms, and I don't know what was wrong with me when I was writing this, or what was right with me when I was writing this. Anyway, Aching Through with Worms as Our Guide is the name of this one. Oh, and this is also an ode to New England. I'm born and raised in New England. I was very fortunate to spend a lot of my youth in Maine. Connecticut's always been my home base, but Maine is where my heart is. I think Tony Bennett left his heart in San Francisco. I left mine in Maine. But anyhow, aching through with worms as our guide. Aching through the worms of a drowned sea sailor, counting the hours in a New England fishing port town. Long ago forgetting the devil, long ago forgetting the saints. A thin brown dog stands in the roadway, weary. I offer my hand, a quick sniff, a passing glance, and he's gone. Left standing, I introduce myself to the sunlight. It's true within this. That which glows iron grows roses. That which conceit vain grows wilted. Aching through with the worms is our guide. I entered Slug's Saloon and I order a shot and a beer to stamp out the sleepless rage, to say a prayer for the horses. Yet still the rootless tombs get bombed and the staring gates turn to rust. If you haven't been to New England, put it on your bucket list. I'm going to get super jovial and talk about my favorite topic of all time, suicide. I am in no way promoting suicide. I actually believe in life. I do. But I'm a suicide case, and I have been my whole life, and I'm willing to admit it so that other people in the boat don't jump overboard thinking they're alone. This one's called Pardon the Suicide Chatter. Hard-mouthed and headlong and closer to God than some, smiling and laughing through the suicide chatter. Pardon the cowardly nature, some of us were born this way. To wipe the dirtiest places improper, but with meaning. To wipe the pleasurable clean. Hard-mouthed and headlong and closer to the end than some, screaming and stacked up through the suicide chatter. Pardon the roses, pardon the glass and the smoke, pardon the bones and the bicycles and the time clocks, and please pardon me. I had no idea I'd end up coming this far, but I'm here. I've lived to tell the tale. Is dedicated to all the audiophiles. So music is my savior. Music is the best. Music is the absolute best thing in my life. Don't tell my wife and kids I said that, but music will always be my first love. And audiophiles would understand this, because for some people, music really is like breath. It really is. The creation of music, listening to music, I can't imagine a life without it. So within that, reggae music is my first child. Jazz music is my second child. And then the stepchild is blues music. You know, I accepted it in the family, but never got too close. Shout out to all the stepkids. So this one is an ode to my favorite jazz trumpeter of all time, Lee Morgan. Now, there's been thousands of amazing trumpeters in jazz. Do I even not mention Miles Davis? Like, that would be a sin. But Lee Morgan's my guy. And the point is these artists, their real life stories is far more fascinating than their music, which is fascinating beyond belief. These men, they were the true sufferers for the art. I don't know if they make them like this anymore. I really don't. I don't know. Anyhow, this one's called Jazz Man Dead. Plagued windmills spin devious, sinking souls of too young and too old and too much in the process, as wildflowers incomparable beckon pale treachery under the same sun and the same moon. Shoeshine clean notions on absolution, rubbing elbows with swing set half smiles. More power to New York in 1972 and more power to Lee. Puzzled looks at the desire to give broad terms. If you're going to get yourself shot by a woman, make sure not to do it on the night of a blizzard. The headline the next day read, Jazzman Morgan, dead.
Oh.
Don't make the women mad on a blizzard night, boy. Ain't going to end up well. So this one's for all the drinkers out there. You might notice the theme at some point. So this one's for all the drinkers. I've drank 3 lifetimes worth, and I'm proud to say I really am. I'm like 50 days sober, and I'm not like bragging or anything. It's just it's almost like now not drinking. It's like I've started a new life, and every experience is brand new. So I look back and I don't regret a second of it. But if you drink enough in your life, you're gonna spill some liquor from time to time. I have, and I noticed that it would always end up looking like those Rorschach blot tests. Like, you could notice the stains started to look like something. Anyhow, this one's called The Shape of Italy. Well, now that the bombs loom and look to alter nature altogether, let's grab a stiff drink and a soft concept. What do you say, baby? We could drink to the sleepless nights. We could drink to the starving days. Hell, we could drink to those damn looming bombs for all I care. Let's just get a drink, huh? In response, she said nothing. She just stared at me for a moment, and then she walked out and shut the door gently behind her as she left. And I scratched my belly and looked at the years-old stain in the center of the rug. In that instant, I realized the stain had a near exact resemblance to the shape of Italy, the boot part and all. It was then that I decided I'd be drinking Chianti all by myself tonight. All by myself. The women always leave me. I'm supposed to be the hero of my stuff, man. What's happening here? Oh, Lord. I'll just keep reading until somebody cuts me off. So if I get past some sort of point of no return, you just let me know. Mighty fine fight. Having been dragged this far by the dogs, why stop now? Neatly bound from fire to fire, the coals simply tickle these days as they're softly swept across the rose thorns. It's been a mighty fine fight indeed. We're stronger than we realize, and we're stronger than we know. Even the live lobster looking back at us in the tanks at the grocery store knows this much. Oh, how easily we forget. The footsteps you hear that don't seem to care are flushed away by the thief in the night, and that's the reminder. As are the slight smiles and invisible hand waves you get in the streets. The next time you're awake as the dark morning turns to light, I want you to think of this. Think of all the inhabitants of this existence who entered with no cover charge, and then think of the cost we pay to exit, the days, the years. Having been dragged this far by the dogs, why on earth would we stop now? Right, this one is called Two Counts. Two Counts. This is just an acknowledgement that women are they're right most of the time. I can't say all the time, but I'll say most of the time. The ladies know. Anyways, this one's called Two Counts. She was right on 2 counts. I'll give her that. I never looked as good with a hat on, and many of my life's pitfalls had been of my own devising. She wasn't right about everything. For example, she told me once that as the skin slowly wrinkles and ages, the soul and mind follow suit. I just couldn't buy that. It didn't fit with my life experience. Sure, my skin wasn't any longer in its supple prime, but my soul and mind were just coming into their own, I thought. I was feeling more sun-fierce than ever and very at home amongst the roaring shadows. I suppose I'm writing this one for the late bloomers out there, those whose stride wasn't hit until later than society deemed that it should be. But what society fails to also tell you is they get it wrong most of the time. Wise men have said, when the crowd goes left, it's best to veer hard to the right. And I've lived by this, for better or worse, usually for better. That's all I have to say about that. This is for anybody who's ever been in a relationship. It can't all be sweet. It can't all. Sometimes you argue. We're human. Sometimes people argue. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong. This one's called Arguing Under the Bright Lights. It's the blessing when you can laugh about the arguments. Anyhow, arguing under the bright lights. Isn't it amazing how the lighting alters the quarrels of love we all engage in with our significant others? I mean, seriously, my old lady and I were bickering just last night. I had just changed the light bulbs in the kitchen, and I had bought the super bright luminescent bulbs by accident, so the whole room was lit up like a police station interrogation room. The argument just seemed different amidst the glow of the room. The words even sounded different. They were far less cutting for some reason. And we both almost simultaneously broke out into a deep belly laughter mid-sentence. It was as if we couldn't hold on to the anger because it was so fucking bright. And the conversation instantly turned into an investigation into how on earth I could buy the wrong light bulbs. It wasn't an angry questioning, just more of, I can't believe there's so many different light bulb options kind of conversation. And she was right. There must have been 50 different types of bulbs to choose from. And I explained to her that I stood in front of that amazing wall of lights and I was almost frozen by the paradox of choice. One would think that more options a person has would make it easier to choose, but I've always found it to be quite the opposite. I must have stood there for 15 minutes just staring at all the different boxes and designs and wattage and shapes and colors and costs, and I finally became overwhelmed to the point of just grabbing the bulbs right in front of me. That's how we ended up in this position, I told her. She said that makes sense to her, and we both decided it was time to turn the kitchen lights off so we could finish our argument more sensibly. We got 2 left, so I can't do my final 2 poems without bringing it back to suicide and death. So here, this one's, I would say sorry if I was. Suicides are sometimes, that's what this one's called. Suicides are sometimes completed at the bottom of the hour when the minute hand is pointing straight down and the hour hand is off somewhere else entirely. Suicides are sometimes completed after a life of too much expectation. We expect too much of each other, too much of ourselves, too much out of a life which never offers a guaranteed contract. No guarantees except death, of course, because nothing is owed, yet our only true debt must eventually be paid. Suicides are sometimes completed quickly. The slice of an artery here, the pulling of an uncaring trigger there, the leap from the bridge or a kicking out of the chair, the handful of pills. Suicides are sometimes completed slowly also. The poison in veins for years on end, the atrophy of a soul, heart, and mind, the smoke-filled lungs, the morbidly obese glutton. You guys know what I'm talking about. Suicides are sometimes impulsive. Sometimes they're thought out. They leave quite awake regardless of how they are completed, but none are without reason. We may not understand the reason, but just know it's there. I'm sure some of them didn't even want to die, but they knew living was no longer an option. For these, I feel the most depth of sadness. Wherever you are, if you can hear me, I just want you to know none of you were forgotten tonight. We're going to end tonight's reading by going to Kathmandu. This is for all the spiritual seekers out there. With all the drinking and the suicide chat, you would think I have no depth and no soul, but I'm actually quite a seeker. Maybe that's the problem. Anyhow, this one's called The Himalayas of Kathmandu. What's the point of it all? I guess the answer depends on how macro or micro you want to get. I bet you'll find some of the most insightful responses to this question in the Himalayas of Kathmandu. Now, I'm only guessing here, but I would imagine it's full of restless, wandering men and women with remarkable storytelling virtuosity there. This may sound like absolute nonsense, but I think I was there once. Maybe it wasn't me exactly, more like the spirit or the essence of me. I know, I'm getting a bit kooky over here, but I mean it. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I even remember the exact date. It was February 6, 1945. This was a time when travel wasn't the simple thing it is today, so I have no idea how I even got there. The first person I encountered on my journey once I arrived was a local police constable. He was a nice enough fella, but when I asked him what the point of it all was, he just stared at me for what seemed like an eternity. And it wasn't a give me a minute, I'm thinking kind of look. It was more like don't even think about messing with me because today isn't the day kind of look. So I decided to move on and find a more monkish looking type. Wouldn't you know, within about 30 steps, I happened upon a gentleman peacefully meditating at the top of a huge boulder. At first, I wasn't sure if I should bother him, but then I figured I might not get back to Kathmandu ever, so I might as well strike the hammer while the iron's hot. From the bottom of the rock, I shouted up my existential question. I'm not sure what I expected at this point, maybe to be ignored, maybe to be told to leave him alone, preceded by a scolding look of excruciating annoyance. What I never expected was for this holy man to slowly float down towards me on the ground. I mean, he literally floated down to me, still in the cross-legged meditating position, eyes closed and everything. I rubbed my eyes really quick to make sure I wasn't hallucinating, and sure enough, my mind was not playing tricks on me. He had displayed the ability to descend at his own chosen pace, and I remember thinking it was a real slap in the face to gravity. Now that he was sitting next to me on the ground, I once again asked him if he knew what the point of it all was. And without missing a beat, he opened his eyes, looked squarely into mine and said, "There is no point. That's the point." And then just as easily as he had lowered himself to me, his body slowly began to levitate back up towards the top of the rock, leaving me in awe of his profundity. So that's the story of what happened to me in the Himalayas of Kathmandu on April 6, 1945. Yep, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it, my friends.